Hi! It's been some time, huh? Anyway, Spellmonger, Book 15, Marshal Arcane. This book kind of takes place during a lot of most of the same time frame that the previous book takes place in, but again, because of how it's written, you're not necessarily going to notice that. It does the perspective thing quite well. So sometimes writers have to write the same scene from different perspectives, and sometimes you just want the information so those scenes can get kind of bland. But this, because the characters have such a strong voice, you can read a scene from Min's perspective, and then you can hear the same scene from Ruderal's perspective, and it comes across as different. A different tone, and you end up learning things about both the characters. It's one of the common things about society. It's one of the common things you'll find about people is that oftentimes your friends know you better than you know yourself because they get to spend time around you. Though I suppose if that was truly the case, all of you might know me better than I know me, and I've never really felt like my videos do me justice. Or maybe I'm just a shitty person, I don't know. The main thrust of Marshal Arcane sort of ends up being this idea called the Dreadnought effect. Despite what Fallout will constantly tell you, war actually changes quite a bit.
War. War never changes.
In fairness, I think they were more talking about how the brutality of war never changes through technological progression, but that's neither here nor there. The Dreadnought effect is just a name given because of a ship called the HMS Dreadnought, which, again, I am hardly an historian, but my understanding is that the Dreadnought incorporated a lot of various technologies together to the point that it could outgun anything and outrun anything as well. So it so severely outclassed anything else that was on the seas at the time that it fundamentally reset the technology of a navy. It's why a lot of nations who previously didn't have much of a navy were able to compete with England afterwards. England had one dreadnought, and say you were Germany and you just decided to build 2 dreadnought class ships. Suddenly you own the waves, That's similar logic. And that entire idea of the Dreadnought effect about how a new technology or tactic can come along and is the fundamental idea in Marshal Arcane. This is not through technological means in Marshal Arcane, it's through magical means, but it's the same kind of thing. Side note, this effect also has another word for it. Sometimes you call it Uberization, referring to how Uber killed taxis, but I'm going to call it the Dreadnought effect because that sounds cooler. So a lot of this book is dedicated to discussions and displays of how magic has fundamentally altered how you fight these wars, and about how the old lessons don't necessarily apply. You see this a lot with people who are, aging military people like your dad, who talk about things like how the best example I can get of is the F-35 is a overexpensive piece of junk, but in actuality it was just made to do something different than the previous generation's jets, which is why, it kind of sucks at those things, but it was never made to do those things. It's fun. It's because the digital age has fundamentally altered how warfare is being done. So a fighter jet that behaves exactly like the Phantom from Vietnam is not a useful thing anymore. And you see that a lot with the aristocracy, particularly in Marshal Arcane. It's kind of hit with you straight in the face. At one time, there is a guy that I forgot his name, but it doesn't really matter, consistently talking about how history has repeatedly shown to hold a castle you need the support of the outlying villages and this thing and this thing, and archers can't hit from this far away, so this is the optimal observation district. He gets an arrow through his head. That is like one of the big smack in the face, warfare has changed moment. And I feel like this is a good series for that discussing that kind of idea, because we've seen how warfare changes throughout the entirety of this series. We go from a kind of a castle siege story in the first one, which is compelling in and of itself, to the more grand campaign of the second book, in the escalating ways in which warfare, in the escalating annals of warfare, so much so that you have to contend with really big things like dragons, and then you have to contend with things that don't actually necessarily have supply lines, and with how supply lines are restocked when you deal with things like the pocket wands or whatever they were called. So much so that we're in the point of Marshal Arcane, where it's like, yeah, technology or magical advancement has hit to the point that we've fundamentally altered how warfare is done. That would be the main idea behind this book. There's a quote from Ulysses S. Grant that I'm sure any Civilization 6 fan knows all too well, that kind of gets the crux of this. I do not underrate the value of military knowledge, but if man makes warfare and slavish obedience to doctrine, he will fail. You got to adapt to the changes of technology and how that can actually revolutionize warfare. Beyond those two major things about this, I will say that the politicking, it's as entertaining as ever. I just spent a couple of minutes talking about what amounts to logistical issues, and the fact that can be made, interesting is a triumph in and of itself, right? Despite what some people would have you believe, I like politics in my fiction. I just prefer that it's done well. One other thing I noticed in this book series is that there is this combined with, I think, Journey Mage. Both had instances where two characters went, "I'll never find love," and then 5 minutes later they're getting hitched. I'm not saying there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but it is kind of becoming to the point where I want somebody to say, "I'll never find love," and have him go, "You're absolutely right." I suppose to tempt fate right now, I'm just gonna say in front of everybody, "I'll never find love."
A sex dream gets rejected in it.
Beyond that, I don't really have that much more to say about this book. It takes this kind of esoteric idea that's tends to be only interesting to historians and history buffs, and makes it interesting as it's filtering it through a magical world. I don't have anything more to say about that, but to the person whom this concerns, yeah, they finally gave it to me.